something we're told in this prophecy is that God is fiercely angry with Iran. And we find out why. He's going to destroy from there the kings and the princes. There's bad leadership, Harry. He's going to destroy bad leadership. Why? They're wanting to launch something somewhere, we're told in the prophecy. What could it be that causes the shaking, that causes the types of things to collapse in our country and elsewhere in the world? And so I look specifically at ancient Bible prophecies that I believe are imminent. As we study Bible prophecy, it's important to take a look at all prophecies. You know, there's the Antichrist, and there's the tribulation, and a harlot world religion, and things like that. But as I got into prophecy, my main concern is what's going to happen now and in my family's future, and that sort of thing. What is imminent? There's a prophecy in Isaiah 17 that talks about there'll be a destruction of Damascus. Yeah. And it says Damascus will cease from being city. It'll be a ruinous heap. That has not found fulfillment yet. Some people say that happened in 732 BC with the Assyrian Empire. But I say, look, Isaiah spoke in the 66 chapters 37 times about Assyria, and he never once mentions them in Isaiah 17. However, in verse 9 of Isaiah 17, he talks about there'll be desolation because of the children of Israel. Means there has to be an Israel. Verse 14, it talks about, at eventide you see Damascus, but in the morning he is no more. Speaking of Damascus in the masculine pronoun.
Can I say this? The Assyrians could have never destroyed them in that 6 to 12 hour time frame. Right. Not in their day. It would have taken days and days to destroy them, right?
Right.
Is that right?
Absolutely.
So this is a future prophecy is what you're saying.
Absolutely. Never found historical fulfillment, and it is primed to have. There is an Israel now, and there's a technology that one night you'll see Damascus, and in the morning it won't be there. That's the concern. I'm looking for that, but Psalm 83, I've been on the show many times with Jonathan. We've talked about that concluding Arab-Israeli war that talks about they'll come together in a confederacy to cut the nation of Israel off, that the name of Israel will be remembered no more. It predicated that there had to be an Israel. We have an Israel.
Can I ask you this? I don't want to interrupt you, but while it's on my mind, ISIS is in Syria, okay? Do you think it's possible, now this is just a scenario, that something ISIS does could lead to the destruction of Damascus?
I think it is, and I'm going to get to that, because I think something's going to happen that leads to ISIS even expanding further. I will say I think ISIS could be part of Psalm 83 if they go unchecked. Currently, the swaths of territory that ISIS has come under control is in ancient Assyria at the time the psalm was written, in northern Syria and northern Iraq. And it's very specific in Psalm 83, verse 8. It says that Assyria will join with the children of Lot and will help them. And we're dealing with, that's Jordan. Moab and Ammon, they were the children of Lot. And Jordan is probably the next target on ISIS's agenda. But I think what I'm watching for most of all right now is a vastly overlooked prophecy. I've written a book on it called Nuclear Showdown in Iran. It's come out. It's revealing that ancient prophecy of Elam that you spoke about. And this prophecy, it's 6 verses. And I start by summarizing in just a nutshell to give an overview of the prophecy, but I quickly can go through these verses and unpack it for you.
Can you do it? Let's do that.
What happens is our loving God, who so loved the world, that sent his only begotten Son, that whoever believed in him will not perish but have everlasting life. He has foreign policy in place in Genesis 12, verses 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. And what it says is how you treat Abraham and his descendants is how you'll be treated. If you bless them, you'll be blessed. If you curse them, you'll be cursed. That foreign policy written 4,000 years ago is still effectually intact. It is in play right now. So we have this whole bunch of enemies of Israel over there that want to curse Israel. So what Jeremiah said in 596 BC, that God is going to be fiercely angry at some point in time with Elam. And Elam, if we can get this up on the map, we'll show you a map of where Elam is on a modern-day map of Iran. There it is. You've got, as you see a modern-day map of Iran, you see that Persia comprises about 5/6 of Iran, and Elam comprises the other 1/6. And you see on there's a nuclear power plant there. I'm going to come back to that. That's the Bushehr nuclear power reactor. It's a nuclear disaster waiting to happen. It is the crown jewel of Iran's nuclear program. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But something we're told in this prophecy is that God is fiercely angry with Iran. And so we find out why. He's going to destroy from there the kings and the princes. There's bad leadership, Perry. There's bad leadership. You don't destroy good leadership. He's going to destroy bad leadership. Why? They're wanting to launch something somewhere, we're told in the prophecy. They're going to want to launch something somewhere. Well, Iran today wants to launch something somewhere. Don't we know that? A big deal right now with Iran's nuclear program. So as I go through this, we find out that God's upset with them because they're trying to launch something somewhere. They're bad leadership. This did not happen during the time of Jeremiah or subsequently. Now, I will say this. Iran has had good leadership in the past, and it's important to recognize this. Jonathan brought it up with the Persian Empire. 539 BC, King Cyrus, who was mentioned by name in Isaiah 44 and Isaiah 45, was instrumental. He was called my shepherd, God's anointed. And when this prophecy was given to King Cyrus, after 70 years of captivity in Babylonian captivity, he was amazed, and the first thing he did was he fulfilled that prophecy. After 70 years, the Jews would go back into their land, and he sent them back, speaking of those cycles. But Iran has got bad leadership right now, and it says he's going to break the bow of Elam, hit them at the foremost of their might. Not only is he going to break the bow of Elam, he's going to hit them at the foremost of their might. He's going to prevent them from launching something somewhere. So it says that there's going to be the break the bow at the foremost of their might. And then it says, as this disaster happens, this judgment happens, that he's going to call the four winds from the four quarters of heaven. He's going to scatter those outcasts of Elam, the Elamites, the indigenous population, into those winds. There'll be no nation where the exiles don't go. This sounds like a humanitarian crisis. We're not talking about what's going on with the modern day example of the Syrian refugee camps and things with, half of Syria has been displaced on some level. You got 2 or 3 million of them in refugee camps, but they had to get out into the neighboring areas. We're talking about a worldwide dispersion. What would necessitate that? Sounds like a nuclear scenario here.
Wow.
Okay. Then he goes on and says, Elam will be dismayed before their enemies and those that seek their lives. Does Iran have enemies today? Well, Israel's very concerned. The international community is trying to negotiate with the P5+1 with Iran's nuclear program to get them to contain it. Israel wants it dismantled. What about the GCC, Gulf Cooperative States across the Gulf over there that are very concerned about Iran's nuclear program? They're very concerned. By the way, the Persian Gulf over there, 2/3 of the world's desalinization plants are over there. And potable water and drinking water is extremely a rare commodity over there. There was an earthquake because this Bashar nuclear plant is built where 3 tectonic plates converge. There was an earthquake in 2013, 6.3 followed by a 7.1 near the border of Iran and Pakistan, and 37 people were killed, 850 people were injured, and that prompted the GCC states, which would be Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, the UAE, to do an intense study about what's going on, what could happen if there was an earthquake or an Israeli strike on that nuclear facility. And they determined and issued a report in July of 2013 that 40 to 100% of their populations could be affected adversely in 15 hours, but only 10% of Iran's population could be affected because you have the Zagros Mountains right there that blocks them, that could in a blow over. So they decided to build a 1,242-mile pipeline at the cost of $10.5 billion to be completed by 2020, not for oil, Perry, but for drinking water to get through there because they're so concerned about Iran's nuclear thing. It goes on to say that because I'm fiercely angered, the Lord speaking, I will bring a disaster in Elam. We're talking about a disaster. Are we talking about a nuclear disaster? Are we talking about a humanitarian crisis that results from this? Yeah. And that's the bad news for Iran. I mean, and that will affect the world because they've threatened to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. They threaten terror throughout the world and our interests and things like that.
Does anybody here want to maybe express, and we can't really give an opinion because nobody knows, why with the warnings that Mr. Netanyahu gives, Mossad agents know, our intelligence knows, the danger of empowering the regime that's in charge there now, and they're a wonderful Persian people, by the way, here in the United States. Some of my closest friends are Iranian Persians, okay? And they're very, very, they remember the Shah. When the Shah of Iran was in, it was a great nation. It was a prosperous nation. Then the revolution happened in '79, changed everything, and the fanatics took over. We don't want to get into politics here. That's not why we're here. We're not politicians, and we don't get into politics. But does anyone have an idea? Do you think it's possible that just as in Romans 11, Israel, God allowed the veil to come over their eyes to allow the Gentiles in? Is there just a veil over leadership that the Lord is just going to fulfill his purposes using Israel, using the nations, and America's just going to kind of be back there? I mean, can anybody want to kind of go there for just a minute? Because a lot of people, I get questions about this all the time for emails. So do we have an opinion? Is it a blindness that's coming on the Gentiles or coming on this great nation? Maybe.
I think the Bible says sin causes blindness. And so if we are, right now driving God out of our lives, God out of our culture, God in all these ways, we can't do that without having some kind of blindness. It happened with the leaders of ancient Israel. They made big mistakes, and they often would engage when they didn't have the defense anymore. They didn't realize it, and God did this. God caused disaster. So, one of the things that I've seen with the harbingers is that people do things, say things, leaders say things without realizing what they're doing. We have several leaders who actually pronounced judgment on America. I mean, several of them, without realizing what they were doing. So yeah, you can, God is going to have his way in the end, and you cannot mock him. So yeah, I believe that is an absolute dynamic.
In other words, the rejection of God creates a blindness to where you're saying to someone, why would we give a terror nation power? And it's like, why not? Yeah. We can negotiate. Can you imagine David showing up to Goliath and saying, I'd like to make a peace treaty with you? I mean, the Philistines are killing everybody. You can't negotiate with a fanatical regime. Right. You can't negotiate with ISIS. Someone said on television, if we could just give ISIS jobs, they'd quit doing what they're doing.
Yeah. It's unemployment.
They don't want jobs because they go in and rob a whole bank and take everything out, and they've got oil on the black market. They don't need jobs. And so it's difficult. But do you have an opinion? Is it a blindness? I mean, Mark, kind of comment, because a lot of people are asking this.
Right. Well, in Isaiah, and I think it's 25, it may not be, but God says he's going to remove the veil that is over all nations. So there's a veil over all nations. And as we know, we see through a glass darkly. That's what it says. We only know in part. But the thing we have to realize is it also says in Proverbs that the king's heart is in the Lord's hands, and he turns it where he will.
Yeah.